Hey folks, Jackdaw here. Today I am uncovering the latest news updates on Dragon Age Dreadwolf's developments since early June, when Dreadwolf's title was officially unveiled, and at around the same time we received a trailer on Dragon Age Absolution, a Dragon Age Netflix show that is coming in December, and I've talked about plenty on my channel. In the past 2 months we've had more blog posts from the Dragon Age team, there have been a few new hirings as well as departures, there's some production updates and teasers, an inkling on a Dragon Age Origins remaster, and a lot more that I'm going to explore in this video. Let's delve in and talk about this Dragon Age Origins remaster inkling. In February of this year, I explored some news about a Dragon Age remaster or a Dragon Age Legendary Edition that kind of snuffed the idea of it out. And that was VentureBeat reporter Jeff Grubb claiming that EA had no plans for a remastered Dragon Age trilogy akin to Mass Effect Legendary Edition. Now, Jeff Grubb is a very valid reporter and I would definitely trust his word. But upon hearing this news, we all completely excluded the idea of a full revamp of Dragon Age games, and it kind of felt like a bit of a killing blow, like why can't Dragon Age have the same treatment as Mass Effect? However, that report wasn't indicative of a Dragon Age Origins remaster, it only mentioned a Dragon Age Legendary Edition. And so we get to today's hint. On July 19th, former executive producer Mark Darrah replied to someone asking if he thinks we'll get a Dragon Age Origins remaster, and Mark Darrah said that his probability of a Dragon Age Origins remaster is way higher than it was in 2019. Now, if you've followed me or this Dragon Age Origins story since way back then, we explored that actually in 2018, Mark Darrah was hopeful for a Dragon Age Origins remaster. However, he did say that it would be an involved job. Now, right now in 2022, Mark Darrah is way more hopeful than he's ever been for a Dragon Age Origins remaster, despite Jeff Grubb's report. So surely that is something to be excited about. We may not get a full Dragon Age Legendary Edition remastered package with Dragon Age Origins, Dragon Age 2 and Dragon Age Inquisition, but there is at least hope for a single Dragon Age Origins remaster. And you know what? I think that would be perfect. A great way to market Dragon Age to new players either before or after Dragon Age Dreadwolf's release, while offering plenty of fixes, optimizations and massive improvements to a 13-year-old game. Obviously, we should definitely take Mark's high hopes with a pinch of salt because he doesn't work at BioWare anymore and he is just speculating. But even so, the idea alone of a Dragon Age Origins remaster is so exciting. I really do hope that something becomes of this, even if it's after Dragon Age Dreadwolf's release. You know, unless they get like a third-party company to work on this Dragon Age Origins project and then somehow manage to get it out before Dragon Age Dreadwolf. It really depends on BioWare's current time frame, but I really wouldn't expect this sort of project anytime soon unless they have been working on it for a while or unless they have immediately got a third-party studio to work on it. But even so, we're just going to have to wait and see if BioWare do surprise us with a Dragon Age Origins remaster. Now, moving on to BioWare departures and hirings, animation director Mike Jungbluth has left the Dragon Age team as of June 17th. He tweeted, "Today is bittersweet as I leave BioWare for my next adventure. Direction is lighting a fire and passing the torch, and that creative fire burns bright in the team I helped grow here. To add a bit of myself into a series like Dragon Age has been a privilege I won't forget. Absolutely wishing you the best on your future endeavors, Mike, and thank you for your contribution to the Dragon Age team." In contrast to that, publication Recitira reported that Mary DeMarle joins BioWare as a senior narrative director. Mary is one of the people who was behind the Guardians of the Galaxy story as well as Deus Ex, and now she's working for BioWare. I don't know about you, but I actually really enjoyed Guardians of the Galaxy. I thought it was a fantastic game with an incredible story, very much akin to all of the lore and narrative that is involved in the comics. It was perfect, and it did not deserve all the flack that it got because of its marketing phases. Guardians of the Galaxy is a fantastic game, and I wholeheartedly recommend it to any Marvel or sci-fi fan. Go and play that game and give it some love. Either way, the narratives that Mary has helped craft have been fantastic, and I absolutely have high hopes for whatever project she is going to be involved in. The final departure we have from the BioWare team is lead game product manager Hader CW. Hader left the Dragon Age team on July 2nd, and they tweeted, "Deref Sharal BioWare. I've always been a huge fan, and working here was like a childhood dream come true. I feel so fortunate to have worked on the next Dragon Age. It's going to be an awesome game, and I can't wait to play it as a fan. Excited for what's next." And again, absolutely wishing you the full best on your endeavors, Hader, and also thank you for your contribution to BioWare and the Dragon Age team. Now, very similar to this, but in a more worrying direction, the BioWare team very recently put out many different hiring positions for Mass Effect and the next Dragon Age. And while that's all well and good, there are quite a few high-level Dragon Age positions that BioWare are currently hiring for. Positions that we would have hoped would be occupied right now, like a producer and a world design lead. I haven't actually seen any developers with these roles leave recently, so unless that's just gone over my radar, these could be new hirings for those positions. But But even so, it is slightly worrying that right now, currently, the Dragon Age team is hiring a lot of key pivotal roles. Now, I'm not going to call this all doom and gloom. I was just surprised to see the amount of Dragon Age hirings at the moment. It could also just be indicative that production is just steadily continuing as the Dragon Age team hires out more positions to continue and push out this game in due course. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bad thing, but we're just going to have to wait and see. Now, moving on to a smaller production update, a few of the BioWare developers are somewhat returning to the office, having largely worked from home with the continued effects of the pandemic. Thanks to Sheila Costa's talk on how BioWare have adapted to the pandemic and the workarounds they've done to the team, we know that the developers have spent a lot of time working from home while adapting to the changes of the pandemic. And that has helped the teams hire even more talent remotely outside of Edmonton and the Austin-based areas. And there have been many other adaptations they have made from working from home. However, it would now seem that a few of the members have started to return to the office. Producer Crystal McCord tweeted, "We had our first optional in-person team meeting today. There were 10 people in the room and 40 over Zoom. It felt great, and I'm glad to be able to connect with co-workers in a way we haven't been able to for 2.5 years. It's super great to see that BioWare are attempting to return to somewhat of a normalcy since the pandemic. However, it being optional for those who just don't want to and for those who simply can't because they don't live in the area." In the middle of editing this video, EA actually just had a financial earnings call. However, nothing Dragon Age Dreadwolf was related. EA did say that apparently single player games are, quote, really important part of our overall portfolio, end quote, which, if nothing at all, is at least indicative of the next Mass Effect and Dragon Age's future, that they're going to remain single player focused and that actually EA do consider single player games to be important in their future. So here's hoping they stick with that. Now, moving on to a big BioWare blog post. On July 15th, BioWare tweeted, "For us, Pride doesn't end after June. This special entry in our developer story series invites some of our LGBTQIA+ colleagues to talk about what the studio and its games mean to them as queer folks. And we're just going to go and read this entire blog out. Welcome to a very special entry in our developer story series. While previous editions have featured a single subject, in the wake of Pride Month in June, we invited some of our LGBTQIA+ colleagues to talk about what the studio and its games mean to them as queer folks. So please allow us to introduce you to Technical Product Manager Lina Anderson, Technical Animator Samantha Wald, Programmer Rachel Hammond, and Cinematic Designer Michaela Stock, who were all kind enough to share their personal histories with us." How did you end up at BioWare? Rachel said, "Game development was something I've wanted to do my entire life, from when I first played with our family's Atari and NES, and on through all my childhood. By the time I got to college, I'd fallen in love with programming as well, so I joined my campus's Game Development Association, where I made friends and contacts who helped me land my first job in industry a bit over 15 years ago. I worked with a few smaller companies before getting my job with BioWare 11 years ago, and I've been here ever since." Samantha said, "My path into the industry was a lot less direct. I studied broadcasting in college to get myself into video editing, but I eventually started rendering graphics in 3D. I was instantly hooked, and I started doing rigging for animated shows and films, but I'd always been a huge gamer, and about 3 years ago, I realized my skills would transfer perfectly to technical animation. BioWare has always been one of my favorite studios, and I was so excited when I got the offer to come work here 6 months ago." Michaela said, "I'm relatively new to the games industry too. I got my start working on 2D educational kids games after graduating with a degree in animation. I've been with BioWare for a little over a year now, working on Star Wars: The Old Republic." And Lina said, "BioWare is actually my first experience in the games industry, but I've been here for over 5.5 years. I had dreamed about working in games since I was a kid and was really surprised to get in on my first attempt. How have BioWare games impacted you as a queer person?" Samantha said, "As a trans woman, I spent a large majority of my life being uncomfortable with who I am and how I'm perceived by society. Before I transitioned, games were always an outlet for me to feel comfortable and explore my identity. BioWare games in particular gave me that in a completely supportive, non-judgmental space, and I really don't think I'd be where I am today without them." Lina said, "Agreed. Both Mass Effect and Dragon Age were instrumental in helping me rediscover myself. I'd repressed so much over the years, and building characters that reflected aspects of me that I'd been hiding allowed me to safely explore those thoughts and feelings. I found I was able to talk about things I'd previously kept bottled up, using my characters and companions as proxies, something that I wasn't yet comfortable enough to do on my own. Nobody batted an eye when I talked about Lady Shepard having a fling with Garrus." And Michaela said, "I always found BioWare games, specifically the Dragon Age games for me, at a time when I was still kind of figuring out who I was. I was fortunate enough to be raised in an open-minded household, but it's always different being told something's okay versus seeing it on screen in front of you, presented as being completely normal, you know?" And Rachel said, "Yes. Watching them start pushing for more inclusion years ago, allowing gay and and bi romance options, that was a real help for me at the time. But even outside of my direct personal experience, it was so good to see that inclusion spreading through the industry. Why do you think BioWare games resonate so well with queer players? Samantha said, BioWare games have always been about playing your character however you want, so I think it's exceptionally easy for players to insert themselves into the main character. And since queer folks have had so little representation in the past, BioWare games are likely to be the first place a lot of folks are able to see themselves reflected in media. Michaela said, right, they provide a space for players to explore their identities. There are so many well-rounded characters that it's hard not to find a couple that resonate with you, and watching the story of a character you deeply connect with play out can be incredibly cathartic. And it's about not being afraid to tell LGBTQIA+ stories. Rachel said, yes, games that try to be more open and attentive towards queer identities definitely help us find ourselves in them, but they help other players see us too. The benefit doesn't stop simply with our first-hand experience, it also helps normalize queer identities for other players, letting others know we're real, we're normal, we're part of the industry. Lana said, and the thing for me is that the games don't just have a couple queer characters you can run into, and then you're off shooting some aliens again. There are characters that we grow with through the series, form bonds with, and can choose to be close to. Do you think BioWare games have made an impact on the way the industry approaches LGBTQIA+ topics? Michaela said, I think an exposure to LGBTQIA+ topics in games is a step towards normalizing them in the industry, and BioWare's decision not to shy away from telling those stories, but to embrace them was a welcome breath of fresh air. Samantha added, and I think that's really led the way in destigmatizing queer relationships in games. By being this inclusive in games that are both successful and popular, they made it clear that queer representation is not a detriment, but actually a positive and something a lot of players are hungry for. Lana said, yeah, I remember seeing the original Mass Effect making waves for having a same-sex romance option. It was absolutely the first major game I was aware of where this was a thing at all. And I think that by showing you could have a gay romance between a human and an alien and not have retailers refuse to stock your games, they may have opened some eyes and made it an easier pitch. Rachel said that's exactly it. The way BioWare handled inclusion rippled through the industry, leading it to other studios leaning into that content, which meant that even more games were comfortable with it. It helped move everyone forward. And lastly, the final question, do you feel like BioWare sees and supports its queer employees? Samantha said, to me, the biggest thing I see BioWare doing to support queer employees has been to empower them. I have never seen so many queer people in senior leadership positions as I have in my time here. Michaela said, everyone I've had the pleasure of working with has been nothing but kind and accepting, and I've never felt the need to be anything but myself. That fosters such a great sense of communication and community. I don't feel like I'm living inside a vacuum while I'm working. The rest of the world still exists, and its impact on employees is not taken lightly. Rachel said, I've been with BioWare for more than a decade at this point, and I've only seen the support for our LGBTQA staff grow. There have been some missteps along the way, sure, but the most important thing I've seen is that people are eager to listen, learn, and do better. I've seen a great amount of work to be put to ensure that happens in every circumstance. When I started here, I was not out to anyone about being trans. I had transitioned years ago, but I was afraid to tell anyone. But in my time here, I was given the confidence I needed to come out again on my terms. So many other workplaces I've been at pushed me back into the closet, but BioWare helped me actually feel free to express my whole self. And Lena said, oh, absolutely. If I wasn't in a place like BioWare, I probably still wouldn't be out. Coming out as trans was terrifying in general, but knowing my manager and leadership were there for me as I announced who I really was made all the difference. Thank you to Michaela, Rachel, Samantha, and Lena for sharing these stories. At BioWare, we're dedicated to diverse, inclusive culture and try to show that through our people and our games. Of course, we know there will always be more to learn in order to best support our teams, but we look forward to that continued growth because while it may no longer be Pride Month, BioWare is always proud of our colleagues. Absolutely incredible blog from BioWare there, and just a few members of the Dragon Age team who are LGBTQIA+. It's really great to hear that BioWare are dedicated to creating diverse, inclusive cultures and characters, and that they actually have the team and the people who can do that. It does paint a really good idea of the representation that is going to be expressed in Dragon Age Red Wolf, and I'm absolutely so down for more inclusivity in Dragon Age. I can't wait to meet all of these amazing characters and hear their incredible stories. And moving on to the next story, which showcases a misstep in BioWare's direction, we're going to go over the Black, Indigenous, people of colour representation in Dragon Age. Now, I didn't see the full extent of this discussion in Twitter. However, essentially, fans were understandably and in their own right criticising Dragon Age's lack of Black, Indigenous, people of colour. Now, in the end, a few members of the Dragon Age team got involved in this conversation, and creative director John Epler tweeted the following. Said, I want to add, it's entirely completely fair to say that Dragon Age has had a problem with Black, Indigenous, people of colour representation in past games. Addressing this is something we are committed to. It is not wrong to ask us to do better on this, but this is legitimately the most I can do right now. Offer assurances. At some point, we'll have details and you can judge our work properly. Every game we make mistakes, and every game we try to do better than the last. And in doing better, we'll also make some fresh new mistakes, and we'll keep trying to do better. I think this kind of just ties into what BioWare said in their blog there. BioWare have made missteps and they'll make more missteps on the way. But the most important thing is, as Rachel said, the teams at BioWare and the Dragon Age team are eager to listen, learn, and do better. Apparently there is some great work going into that at BioWare, and that encompasses every circumstance. So I think that as an assurance for now is at least decent. We're going to have to wait and see when we hear more about the games and when BioWare and the teams can actually talk about the games, because under legality reasons they cannot just come out and say what is going on with the next game. This debate in itself opened up another wormhole about NDAs, and even Mark Darrah getting involved, saying that he's almost had trouble by mentioning a few things about Dragon Age in the past on Twitter, and so it's best just to not say anything. However, we can be assured that Black, Indigenous, people of colour will be represented in Dragon Age Dreadwolf, and that BioWare are eager to listen, learn, and do better with each project and each game they make. Of course, they are just words and just assurances online. We're just going to have to wait and see when Dragon Age Dreadwolf does hit the shelves and we can critique the game for ourselves. I do trust in the Dragon Age teams though, and the people in power who are hopefully going to put those assurances into actions. Anyway, with it being early August, we do have Gamescom 2022 now. In Gamescom 2020, we did see a Dragon Age behind the scenes trailer, which I devoured to death 2 years ago in a massive breakdown video, which does beg the question, will BioWare be at Gamescom 2022? I don't know. I don't really have any high hopes. I think all my hopes at the moment are on the Game Awards in December, alongside Dragon Age Absolution's release in December. But even so, I am going to be streaming Gamescom 2022. You are more than welcome to join in and clown with me. At this current point, all we know is we're going to hear more from the teams at some point on Dragon Age Dreadwolf later this year, and it's already August, so there's like a 5% chance that we could at Gamescom. We're just going to have to wait and see. Either way, it's going to be fun just to tune in, see what games do turn up, and have fun that way. So if you'd like to join, of course, turn those notifications on and get that clown makeup ready. But anyway, do tell me all of your thoughts on each of these stories. But of course, for all your things Dragon Age Dreadwolf, from news to speculation to lore videos to all of that juicy stuff, you're already in the right place. I've been Jackdaw, and until the next one, I should go. Whoa, 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 whoa.